The hurricane season is upon us here in the Low Country. Today, I talk one-on-one with ABC News 4 Chief Meteorologist Dave Williams about the upcoming season. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Chief Meteorologist Dave Williams, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Glad to see you, my friend.
I appreciate it greatly, and I know that you're on vacation, so thank you for your time as well.
Not a problem.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm sitting outside here in downtown Charleston. And you can't tell, but it's humid out here, and it's windy now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it finally heated up. I ran 4 miles this morning. It felt like I ran 8 last week.
Yikes. Woo. What's your 4-word forecast for this week?
That one's easy. Hot, humid afternoon thunderstorms.
Wow. That's amazing. That is really amazing. And we're in this time and where it's going to get hot as time goes on. And obviously we're in the hurricane season as well. And I want to go back to obviously last year and obviously the beginning of this hurricane season, because obviously last season we had a very powerful ending. And this season had a little bit of a bad start. Will we have a powerful finish this year?
There's really no way to tell exactly if we are or not, but I say it's already a bad season because we did. We got hit by Bertha. And Quintin, we can go back more than just last year. We can go back over 5 years. We can go back to 2015 when we got the impacts from Hurricane Joaquin and the upper level low that was in Florida, and that gave us the Great Flood. And then in 2016, it was Matthew. 2017, it was Irma. 2018, it was Florence. 2019, it was Dorian. And now we've got Bertha. So it just seems like year after year, we're getting hit.
Speaking of Dorian, obviously there were no steering currents when it came in. Why was that the case?
So what happened, it got into an area down in the Bahamas where it wasn't near a jet stream. It wasn't near any upper level low pressure centers, any upper level highs to steer it. And once it did get steered, that's when it got kicked up out of the Bahamas and started to move up the East Coast. And what you've got to remember about a lot of these tropical systems, especially the late season tropical systems, they're moving through 2 different wind currents. They're coming across the Atlantic Ocean on the trade winds, which pushes the storms to the west. And then once they make the turn to the north and they start to head up into the mid-latitudes, into Florida and the Carolinas, then they get hit by the westerly winds, which push them back to the east. So these storms sort of look like they curve, and it's because they're going through 2 different spots in the Earth's atmosphere where they're getting steered by very different currents.
In your mind, was Dorian that is a kind of a sluggish storm?
Sluggish maybe, but a trend that I've seen over the last several years is that these storms do tend to stall from time to time. If you go back and look at Hurricane Harvey and what it did in the Houston area, it just sat there for 3 or 4 days and rained 6 feet of rain. So I think that's something that we really have to pay attention to, is that if one of these hurricanes does come in and stall right over top of us, we could be talking about feet of rain and another repeat of what we had in 2015 with the Great Flood.
And that's when water comes in, because obviously water is a big killer after these storms.
Yeah, the biggest killer is usually from the storm surge, which is the ocean water being pushed right up out of the ocean. But then, you've got to think about with the rainwater and the fresh water flooding that you get from the rain that drains from higher ground down toward the beach. So there are many different threats that you have to look at with a hurricane, and no hurricane's the same. If a landfalling hurricane comes on shore here, then we've got the storm surge to worry about. If it's going to come on shore a little bit farther up to the north, usually the storm surge isn't a big deal. And that's pretty much what we saw with Dorian. The storm surge went up to the north. But if you think about storms like Irma even, Hurricane Irma made a landfall on the other side of Florida in the Gulf of Mexico. But the storm surge was out in the Atlantic Ocean and came all the way up the coast and hit us. So the storm doesn't really even have to be close. It just you have to watch the different impacts and how it's going to affect you.
And that brings me to my next question. Formation versus landfall. How should we prepare for that?
So formation, that's kind of when you get prepared. That's when you say, okay, this thing has a chance to come our way. And that's when you start to check off your list, like have your house secured, have your food, have everything ready to go. Kind of like we had to do with our COVID preparation, because you could be stuck inside for a long time if you're not going to evacuate. You may run out of electricity. So in the formation stage, that's when you make your plan and be ready to put that plan in motion. And then when we say a storm could make landfall here, that's when you need to say, am I going to stay or am I going to go? And I say, if the governor ever issues an evacuation order, you need to go. They're issuing that for a reason. And it's because you could be in harm's way when that storm comes nearby.
And earlier you talked about storm surge, and obviously people get, I guess caught off, for lack of a better word, on categories. But really, do categories really matter, Dave?
It can and it can't. Sometimes the size of the storm can even outweigh the category. Like a few years ago with Hurricane Michael, that's the last hurricane that we had that was a Category 5 that came on shore in the U.S. It was a very small Category 5 hurricane. So it really impacted a small area because it was a small storm. Now, with storms like Irma was huge. So it made landfall in Florida, and the storm surge came all the way up here, which is almost unprecedented. But you have to look at many different things, the magnitude of the storm as far as the size, and then you have to think about the intensity, the wind speed, and things like that. But sometimes it's the size of that storm. A big Category 3 hurricane could be even more devastating than a Category 5 because it could impact a whole lot more people.
Wow. And you just talked about wind speed. I got to talk to you about water temperature and obviously El Nino and La Nina. What exactly is a hurricane development when you think of those three?
Yeah, and it's insane to think that we're looking at something in the equatorial Pacific Ocean to impact our weather right here. It's just insane to think that, but it's very true, because during a La Nina year, which is what we're in right now, the jet stream is much weaker. So the jet stream is not energized, and that's the wind way up high in the atmosphere that comes through the top of the hurricane. So when there's no wind blowing through the top of a hurricane, the hurricane's able to organize and hold itself together, so it doesn't get destroyed. Now, in an El Nino year, the jet stream is stronger, and that tends to tear the hurricanes apart. So this year, yes, we do have a La Nina, so that would mean probably some more hurricanes. But then we also have the warm Atlantic Ocean water. So the Atlantic Ocean water is very warm, not necessarily right here off the coast of South Carolina, because our water's been a little bit cooler, but the entire basin where these storms come from is very warm. So that leads me to believe that later on, once we get into the end of July, August, September, that's when we could really see an influx of those storms coming out of the center of the ocean. And then, have you heard about the Saharan dust, Quintin?
I heard about that on Instagram.
Okay. So the Saharan dust, it's out there. It's nothing that we've never seen before. In fact, we saw it just last year. And Saharan dust, when it gets up into the atmosphere, so it blows off of Africa, it gets lofted up in the atmosphere like 30, 40,000 feet, maybe even higher, and floats all the way across the Atlantic basin. That's really good for a couple of reasons. First of all, it prevents the sun's light from completely penetrating down to the ocean surface. Right. So it blocks a little bit of sunlight, which is energy for those storms. Another thing that it does is that dust, ever so slightly, settles back down to the surface of the ocean. And as it sinks, it creates a sinking motion in the atmosphere. And that would tend to be something that would keep hurricanes from forming, because they need upward motion through the atmosphere. So this Saharan dust, as long as it wants to hang around, I am fine with it. And it has no bearing on our weather down here at the surface, because it's way up in the atmosphere. Might give us a little bit brighter red sunsets. I noticed this morning, I looked outside about 5 o'clock in the morning. The dog got me up early. But one of the stars that I saw was a really reddish orange rust color. And I'm sure that was because of the Saharan dust that's in the atmosphere.
That's amazing. And obviously, we're still talking about hurricane season. What are those unconventional tips that we should be doing right now as far as using it?
Get your checklist. Know what you need to do if a storm is coming nearby. So some of the first things to do, well, the first thing to do is know if you're going to stay or if you're going to go. And if you're going to stay, you need to have your house prepared. So you need to have plywood over the windows, things like that, hurricane shutters, however you're going to protect your house. Then you need to have a family plan. You need to have food on hand. You need to have batteries. You need to have flashlights. You need to have a NOAA weather radio with batteries. So if the power goes out, you need to be getting those watches and warnings. Your phone might not be able to do it. I mean, your phone is a great thing, but if you run out of charge on your phone, you're not going to get any information anymore. And your internet could get knocked out. Cell towers could get knocked out. So the NOAA weather radio is really important. You want to have fresh water. At least 3 days worth of fresh water. You need to have some food. You need to have your medical supplies. If you take medicines, be ready to stock those up before a storm. So you just need to check off each of the boxes there and have everything ready to go if you need to put that plan in motion. And until a storm forms and really looks like it's headed this way, you don't have to set that plan in motion. You just have to have the plan and be ready.
Storm Tracker Chief Meteorologist Dave Williams, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. Always great to talk with you and always great to see you running around town, my friend.
Likewise.